Hello, everyone. On behalf of the American Federation of Teachers, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar on identifying and creating effective digital assessments. My name is Natalie Dean, and I am the affiliate liaison here at Share My Lesson, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few webinar housekeeping tips. First, we want this webinar to be interactive and engaging. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple apps or widgets that we will use throughout the webinar to interact with you. These include questions. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask the presenters during this webinar, click on the purple Q&A widget that's at the bottom and submit your question. I will be moderating a question and answer session during this webinar, so get those questions in. You'll also see the group chat. This group chat is the navy blue widget. So if you haven't already, tell us who you are and where you're tuning in from. I have already sent a note and see a couple people have also shared their names and their locations, but we will use this group chat throughout the webinar because it's going to allow you to talk to and share your ideas with the other registered participants and the presenters. You're also going to see a Twitter widget. That's because we will be live tweeting during this webinar. So if you have a Twitter account, you can connect your Twitter account within the platform and tweet along with us. We're going to be using the hashtag EduPD, so that's hashtag EDU, P as in Paul, D as in David, EduPD. And then lastly, you'll see polls. Now throughout the webinar, we're going to be asking you some poll questions that will happen directly in the slide area. So these polls are important because your participation in the poll questions is tied to your professional development credit. Speaking of which, some of you will want to get PD credits for your participation today. In order to do so, you must participate in all of the poll questions and complete the survey at the end. Then a PD certificate will be available for download at the conclusion of the webinar, and you'll be able to see that on the left side of your screen. Follow your district's policies and practices for getting to determine if webinar participation will be accepted. You will only be able to download your PD certificate from a laptop or desktop. So if you're on a smartphone or tablet, that's perfectly okay. You will be able to log back in at a later date to access your PD certificate. If you miss a poll question, that's okay also. You can come back to the platform and complete the poll questions that you missed at a later date. We will send you an email approximately 1 hour or so after the live event with a link to access your webinar and certificate on demand. Your certificate is available for up to a year after this webinar ends. In terms of resources, a copy of the presentation slide deck and any additional materials are available in the resource list at the top left of your screen. When viewing, you can expand your slide area by clicking on the maximize icon, which is located in the top right of the slide area, or by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide area. And if you need any help at all, or if you have any technical difficulties, click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. With that said, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our presenters, Becky Frazier and Harold Lawrence with WiseWire. You can read their bios on the right side of your screen. And with that, thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am Becky Frazier, a learning content specialist heading up the STEM division at WiseWire. I've been working in education for the past 28 years, first as a secondary and higher ed math educator, then moving into publishing, and now working mainly in digital formats. I've designed and worked in full curriculum development and have worked extensively with developing and creating digital platforms and digital assessments.
And I'm Harold Lawrence, also a learning content specialist at WiseWire. I taught high school and college level math for 15 years in California, Virginia, and in Oregon, which I now call home. I left the classroom in 2004 to work as a curriculum and assessment specialist. And since then, I've worked in the area of assessment and online learning. My work has included Common Core test development, the creation of technology-enhanced items, and the creation of several online courses. At WiseWire, we use the latest research-based methods to design and develop smart technology-enhanced learning objects. Our website houses a mix of 50,000 searchable bite-sized learning objects that our team has handpicked for teachers, many of which are free to integrate into their lesson plans. We've also opened up our assessment and tech-enhanced item creation platform for teachers to create their own tech-enhanced items to use in the classroom. Today we'll share some important design principles that can be applied when you're choosing or creating your own learning objects and assessments.
Let's start with my favorite subject, math. Now, I'm going to warn all of you, both Harold and I are math people, so you may see more math items than you will other subjects today, but the item types we'll show you are useful for the objectives in many courses, not just in math. Now, let's try your hand at a very typical multiple choice question. This is intended to measure the objective, identify prime and composite numbers. Which number in this list is prime? As we wait for the poll results to come in, I'd love to know if you think that this is a really good assessment for whether students can identify prime and composite numbers. If you have an opinion on this, you can open up the group chat window if you don't have it there already, and tell me what you think of this item. I am seeing some good reasoning happening already. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. And let's move to the next. All right, very good. It looks like most of you got the right answer, 17. Now, I am seeing some really good responses in this group chat for exactly why, this is a very basic item. It's going to ask the student, hey, is this number prime, but is it really going to meet this objective? Maybe you got the right answer because you know what a prime number is. Maybe you couldn't remember what a prime number is, but you know your multiplication facts. You recognize 14, 21, and 35 can all be divided by another whole number, and this could have led you to the correct answer by eliminating all of the other answers. It's a very basic and general example, but it illustrates how a multiple choice item can be limited in its ability to truly measure knowledge about a particular objective. Does this question truly show that students who pick 17 know what a prime and a composite number are? A technology-enhanced item might provide a better option for measuring students' mastery of this objective.
But there are so many different kinds of technology-enhanced items to choose from. How can we determine which type of tech-enhanced item is best for assessing students' mastery of what we're teaching? The right application of technology to learning objectives is a hallmark of evidence-centered design. This design is an approach to assess development that emphasizes meaningful measures of students' mastery of the content and skills they've learned. Think quality over technology, so we aren't just using technology for technology's sake. Both PARC and Smarter Balanced have adopted evidence-centered design for these reasons. Basically, we want students' responses to a tech-enhanced item to reveal more than just right or wrong. Evidence-centered design uses tech enhancement in a way that produces evidence of students' reasoning process. Tech-enhanced items or computer-based assessments can help teachers design learning activities or assessment items that incorporate evidence-centered design. But having access to the tools for creating tech-enhanced items is necessary. We want educators to be able to more effectively target the desired learning outcomes. Okay, remember the multiple choice item about prime and composite numbers?
For this same objective, I've decided that I can use a drag and drop item. And I put that item into our platform so that we can play with it a little bit today. I've actually put a set of samples into an assessment, which is something that you can do, and then assign those items to your students, and you can see what the results are. Okay, let's look. Let's move on. This drag and drop item asks students to categorize a set of numbers. Down at the bottom of the page, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We're asking the students to categorize all of these numbers into one of three categories, either prime, composite, or neither. By categorizing them this way, we can fully measure a student's mastery of the objective. We're asking for both prime and composite. And doing it this way, we can also use numbers that don't fit into either one of the categories. This item can be used to provide formative feedback. Students with incorrect answer choices can show us what misconception they may have. A student would learn, if they didn't already know, that 1 is neither prime nor composite, and they also might notice that 2 is the smallest prime number. This is much more engaging than just a multiple choice question. Students can actually learn from this. Depending on the software that you're using, drag and drop is sometimes also called sorting or bin sorting. You'll see the numbers are picked up and dropped into a bin. Another type of drag and drop item allows users to place items into a given order, such as alphabetic or numeric. This can be used in early grades to have students show numbers either ordered least to greatest or greatest to least. This ordering type is also an ideal item type for testing objectives that require students to alphabetize a list of words, or it can be used to demonstrate understanding for the order of events or a sequence or process that's going on.
So tech-enhanced items offer variety. You can choose an item that will help your students improve their learning, making learning more engaging and meaningful, and by saving precious time with auto-grading. These item types engage students and help us to teach and measure reasoning skills at a higher depth of knowledge. And of course, tech-enhanced items keep students up to date on 21st century learning technology. Tech-enhanced items come in many forms, and it may be easy to become overwhelmed and unsure of which item type best fits your needs. It takes a little practice, but thinking critically about the objective you're assessing and the desired student outcome is a good start, and it will help you to narrow down your choices. We're going to review some sample objectives and discuss which item types are best suited for testing those objectives. But first, let's pre-test your current understanding of skill-based, evidence-centered design. Which of these item types do you think would best assess the objective, identify supporting details in a paragraph? I'll talk briefly about each of these answer choices. So multiple choice items are the most familiar to us, of course. They have 4 or 5 answer choices with 1 correct answer, and in rare cases, fewer than 4 answer choices can be used. Hotspot items are used when we want the student to click on 1 or more parts of a graphic, like clicking on the state of Oregon using an unlabeled map of the United States. Text selection items allow the student to click on words or phrases or sentences in a passage. And matching items provide a way for students to connect answer choices like words, phrases, or numbers or objects to a premise column. So go ahead and enter your answer choice and any other information you'd like to give. Okay, so the poll is showing that most of you chose probably the obvious answer, which is text selection. So with text selection, the advantage is that students don't have to negotiate between the passage and then back to the questions, and that's one of the key features of text selection items. But it's definitely one of the best item formats to use when we want students to pull something from a passage. Let's take a look at an item. Becky, can you show us a text selection item?
Sure. Let me share my screen again. Okay, this is a text selection item. Looks like we're pulling up. Okay, this is a text selection item that I pulled from our WiseWire banks. Now, both PARC and Smarter Balance use the term text selection, but you'll also see it called hot text or highlighting for ELA items where students must identify a specific part of a passage in order to answer a question. You'll see that I'm able to go in and select portions of the passage to make choices on what answers the question directly. When students are given a multiple choice item to meet the same objective, they're limited to the 4 sentences or 4 phrases that are already given to them. This gives them an advantage of some of them already being chosen. In a text selection item, students can select any number of portions of the text. This produces a much stronger application of the skill by allowing more portions and, in this case, multiple selections instead of limiting it to just one answer choice. While this text selection is frequently, and I'd say most frequently used for ELA items, text selection can also be applied in a science or in a social studies activity or an assessment. It's not as often used in a mathematics format simply because it doesn't work well there on the objectives. In science, students might be asked, for example, to locate the hypothesis in a lab report. In social studies, they might be asked to find details within a text that show the underlying causes, maybe for a historic event. Harold, could you show us another item type?
Yes, I can. In fact, I'll talk about fill-in-the-blank items. So these tech-enhanced items can be a good alternative to multiple choice in certain situations. And equation solving is a pretty good example. When a student sees all the answer choices in a multiple choice question, those who don't know how to solve an equation could substitute each answer choice into the equation until they find the right answer. Or, of course, they could try guessing. Fill-in-the-blank items, sometimes called short answer or explicit response, is a better way to measure a student's ability to solve an equation. The student actually has to solve the equation on their own instead of guessing or substituting answer choices into the equation. So using fill-in-the-blank, a correct answer would be much more indicative of a student's equation-solving ability. And the chance of guessing the correct answer is greatly reduced. So basically, we want to know if a student knows or doesn't know how to solve an equation. If a student enters the incorrect answer, we've been able to identify a weakness and help the student master the objective. Becky, can you show us features available with fill-in-the-blank items?
Well, I will show you, once again, math. This is a great tool that we're seeing more and more often on these summative assessments. This is a tool, it's called Equation Builder, and we're seeing that it can be used both as the summative on the assessments, but also as a formative tool because it can actually read the student answer without teacher involvement and can give the student feedback. Students can create math expressions using a built-in keypad where they choose symbols such as a division symbol or formatting such as a stacked fraction. The student will select inside the box where the answer goes, and a second box will appear on screen in which they type their math expression. This eliminates a false negative response where a student might not, for example, insert a space between a number and a symbol. So if a student, and I know that a lot of these examples are fairly low-level courses, but they apply completely to higher level maths and sciences also, especially this equation builder. For example, if the student were to enter 2 plus 3, but forgets to put a space between the 2 and the plus sign, in a typical fill-in-the-blank item, the digital format would score that as incorrect because there's a missing space. When the student uses this equation builder, it's formatted correctly by itself, so the student doesn't get penalized for simple formatting errors. Let's go back to the platform next and look at another objective. This objective is an ELA objective from an ELA standard, and the objective is use correct pronouns to complete the sentences. I'll give it just a second while it pulls up from the platform. This is a drop-down item. Now, in a drop-down, the student chooses the box that words should appear in, and when they click the icon, they're given a choice of answers for each space. This is a great example of where the drop-down item can be used to check student full understanding. The benefits in a drop-down are that students work directly in the text. So I might say, Kayla and he mother. And as a student, if I read that myself, I can note immediately, wow, that sounds wrong. Let me go back and choose something else and choose her. Now, students can evaluate and compare several different options, but they can also compare a combination of options. In this case, I've got 3 different blanks can all be included in just one question. And that gives us so much more information about student understanding and student thinking, or a student lack of understanding, and we can target their misconceptions about any certain concept. This applies to almost any subject matter and curriculum in this case.
Okay, so you can take a minute to look at this item. It's a multiple choice item. Actually, yeah. And so using a standard multiple choice format, this question about Benjamin Franklin's goal for creating a political cartoon would have only one correct answer. But a cartoon such as this might have more than one goal. So in other words, there could be more than just one way to interpret the cartoon. Multiple select question solves this problem. So a multiple select item would more thoroughly measure students' understanding of the cartoon's purpose and the political situation before the American Revolution. Using a multiple select format allows students to demonstrate their reasoning skills by looking at something from more than one perspective. This is a good example of evidence-centered design. It taps more deeply into students' reasoning skills. Another thing I should point out, by the way, is that the number of correct answers in a multiple select item is typically unknown to the student, because the directions will say, select all that apply. And so this makes guessing the correct answer a little more difficult. In fact, the chances of a student guessing the correct answer on a multiple choice item with 4 answer options is, of course, 25%. But for a multiple select item with 5 answer options and 2 correct answers, there's less than a 10% chance of guessing correctly. So again, we have an example of, getting kind of a better idea of what students know and don't know.
Before we move on, I'd like to mention another example or advantage that this type of item gives us. A question like this, what was Benjamin Franklin's goal, is an awesome open-ended question. It's great. You ask it directly to students and they can give you what they are actually thinking. It leads you to completely see what the students are understanding. However, an open-ended question in a high-stakes assessment can lead to unintended bias or sensitivity. Hand-graded questions that require a student write their own response entirely have no equal in the classroom, really. They provide us real information on a student's understanding. They give us an opportunity to talk to our students and find out where their thinking comes from. As an assessment, we need to decide, is the objective something that includes spelling errors? Does it include poor penmanship? Are they graded on how eloquent they are? For many objectives, presenting a good set of possible answers eliminates possible greater misunderstanding. Okay, let's go back and talk about a math-specific item again, just for a minute. One of the requirements starting as early as kindergarten is that students be able to work with data. By grades 1 and 2, we're making graphs and we're letting students put what they know into a visual form using picture graphs and bar graphs. And in junior high, we start using a coordinate plane and line graphs. In a classroom, there's no substitute for a student actually drawing their own graph. However, how can we translate this into an assessment that you as a teacher don't have to go back and hand grade? If you use a multiple choice question, you can really only assess their ability to identify which graph is correct, not to actually graph it. And even then, there's an element of elimination or guessing that takes place. For example, students might look at the graph of the linear equation and say, hey, I know that the y-intercept is at 2, but only one of these graphs actually crosses at y equals 2. So that's got to be the right answer. And the student really doesn't have the ability to grasp the full question on themselves. For the standards that use the word graph as a verb, graphing paper and a pencil have been the best way to determine if a student masters the objective. Even with that paper and pencil, though, students need to have adequate artistic skills in addition to their math knowledge. And then as a teacher, you have to take the time to interpret their answers and possibly deal with confusing eraser marks. Do you know how hard it is to score a graph when there are holes in the paper from repeated erasing? Well, we have a text solution, and I'm going to pull this one up on screen also because this is one of my favorites. Graphing items and this graphing item type are often used on high-stakes exams to provide feedback and to provide feedback earlier on to students while they're still mastering the concept. Now, these graphing items have come a long way from where this was started. Now we have the ability to graph quadratics and exponential functions and many different types of functions. In this particular graphing item, we're looking at a linear function. And to graph the function, students need to first recognize that it is linear. In here, they're given a choice. They would pick linear function. And then they're expected to pick 2 points on the line in order to create their line. Now to demonstrate, I am going to get the item wrong. Let's say that I misread the question, and while I know that the river depth starts at 18 feet, so I'm going to mark 18 as my first point, I'm going to think the river's, the depth is decreasing a lot faster than it is. So I'm going to pick, it's going to go 10 days and it's going to be done. Now, I'm going to go ahead and submit my answer. And I'm going to get a note that I am incorrect. Now, in this case, we're using this as a formative feedback. We want the student to be able to use the item and see what's going on so I can read my incorrect answer choice and say, okay, maybe I need to actually write out the equation and that will help me. So, you know, I'm one of those students that say, no, I don't need to do that. Let me just check the hints. So I check a hint and I say, okay, find the slope and the y-intercept. I can do that part. I'm still not going to write that equation. I think I'm good to go. So once again, I know that, let's see, in the problem it says the depth starts at 18. I'm going to pick 18 again. Here, 18. And then I'm going to see, okay, the rate is a half a foot per day. So it's going to go up by a half a foot per day. And I'm going to go from, oh, let's just say it's going up, sorry. Okay, and there we go. Let's see if I've got it correct this time because I know it's going up. Up, and I got it wrong again. In this case, it is actually showing me that my answer is incorrect. It gives me feedback and explains how I can find the answer. Now I can ask this to show me the correct answer on the grid, and look, there is the correct answer showing now. In an assessment, this technology type levels the playing field. So every student can create an accurate graph to show their answer, as long as they actually know the answer. Technology has made it possible for students to show their mastery without being artistic, and there are no more eraser marks. This is just a cute reminder from our technology team that when we use a digital format instead of using paper, we are being ecologically responsible citizens. Harold, can you talk for a minute about this radio button item?
Yes. So this objective has many parts. So it says understand that shapes in different categories like rhombuses, rectangles, and others may share attributes. This is a radio button item, and it serves a good purpose for the objective. Radio button items use round buttons. And when a student selects one radio button and they change their mind, they can click on another radio button, and the previous choice will automatically become unselected. An advantage to using radio buttons is that it allows multiple questions to be asked within one item instead of having to ask 5 separate true and false questions. And this helps the student process the information in context of their other selections. Rigor is increased because the student is responding to more than just one property of the shape. But it's important to remember that just because an item uses technology to increase rigor doesn't mean it's valid. The validity of an item improves when the directions and answer choices are clear and easy to read, and when the item is free of bias and is well aligned to the objective. The item should not be too hard so that no one can get it correct, or too easy so that everyone gets it correct. Items like these don't provide useful information for teachers. The topic of item validity is an important one, and we'll provide some additional resources about validity in the additional materials. It's worth taking the time to look at this resource if you're not already familiar with the topic of validity. So let's get back to the items shown on the screen. Notice that the fourth statement is really an opinion. Squares are the best shape. It's not based on any properties shown in the diagram. Also, the item as written doesn't really align well to the objective. The objective is that shapes in different categories share attributes, and we only show one shape, so it really should be compared to another shape. So the graphic really is limited in terms of addressing the objective. And also the answer choices are confounding, such as the use of not in one statement, but not in the others. This needlessly increases cognitive load on the student because it requires a student to apply additional mental effort to interpret it. And this is particularly hard for English language learners, which also creates bias. We never intend to confuse or trick our students, but a poorly written tech-enhanced item could have this effect. This is where item validity comes into play. Let's look at another way to write this item. Oh, good. Thanks, Becky. So this revision covers the same objective, but by altering the statements, we've eliminated confusion and have placed more focus on the concept we're trying to assess. Note that we've added a second shape, which allows us to assess more fully the hierarchy of quadrilaterals, like how every square is a rectangle or how every rectangle is a parallelogram, and so on. We've eliminated statements that are opinions or that could be misinterpreted. This item is now more valid, and it uses technology to increase rigor and effectiveness.
Harold, do you want to run through this one and we'll put in the answers?
Sure. Let me make my screen a little larger here. Let's take a look here. So Charles and Brenna each drew a shape, then compared them. Mark each statement about the shapes as true or false. So both shapes are quadrilateral, so that would be true. Both have four sides, or each figure has four sides. Both shapes are rhombuses, and it does appear that all the sides have equal length, so that would also be true. Both shapes are rectangles, and that would obviously be false. A square is a rectangle, but the one Brenna drew would not be a rectangle because the student would be looking or should be looking for four right angles. And that ties into the next one. Brenna's shape has four right angles. That would be false. And Charles' shape is a square. That would be true. So this item is targeted for, I think, maybe 4th or 5th grade before they get into geometry, where there's more sort of technical requirements on how shapes should be drawn in geometry.
Okay, it looks like there are a couple of good hints there if the students get confused. I believe that this objective is a grade 3 objective. So this is early on when students are first learning that different shapes can have the same features and can be called by different names.
Mm-hmm. And I know from working in with tech-enhanced items on a large scale level that a lot of the feedback we get from users is the need, in a formative setting, the need for hints and feedback. That's really important. And so writing good feedback that doesn't reveal the answer is, very, very helpful for educators.
Great. We have given you a lot of information today about commonly used tech-enhanced items and how they function, how you can use them to help ensure questions are both valid and fully measure the objective you want to measure. Now, we've shown WiseWire items throughout, but you need to keep in mind that the high-stakes assessments, SATs, PARCC, Smarter Balance, are beginning to use these more and more, and your students are going to see them at some point. PARCC, Smarter Balanced, and other test development organizations are using these in both formative and summative tests. Exposing your students to these formats helps them feel more comfortable when the stakes are actually high. Now, multiple choice items are still used on those tests, but the current research is showing that the use of technology-enhanced items favors using those items over multiple choice items. Now, as a quick recap, tech-enhanced items reduce the chances of students guessing correctly. They provide a more meaningful test-taking experience for the students, which results in a more valid result that you see on the assessments. They are also able to provide diagnostic information on the thought processes that you simply can't accomplish in a typical multiple choice assessment.
Yeah, and I know from my own experience, my younger son has been going through the Common Core curriculum and has been, most of the assessments are tech enhanced. And I really haven't heard complaints that maybe I might have heard growing up about a bunch of multiple choice questions. I get the sense that my son is having a more of an engaging experience, and they kind of talk more about what they did on the test than as if it were multiple choice, and that's good for me to hear. All right, so we'd like to thank you for attending our webinar today on technology enhanced items. Be sure to sign up for free access to WiseWire's technology enhanced item creating tools, where you can create your own tech enhanced items. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And join us on LinkedIn too. We'd like to finish off the session by answering any questions you might have about today's webinar. So we'll open that up.
Thank you, Harold. Yes, we will turn it over to questions and answers. But before we do that, I just want to thank you and Becky so much for a wonderful presentation. There has been quite a lot of engagement in our group chat, and we do have quite a few questions that have already come in. But I just want to remind everyone that now is the time to go to the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen and type in your questions. I did see that a couple of you were having some technical difficulty, particularly with the poll questions. So once we get through some of the Q&A, what I will do is go back and push those poll questions back out to you. I want to make sure you know, however, the polls are embedded in the slide screen. So you'll click on the answers directly in the slide, and then don't forget to click submit so that your answer is recorded. Okay? Now let's go to our first question. And this question comes from Lisa, but I'm sure everybody wants to know, is WiseWire free?
WiseWire is actually free to teachers. You can go in and create your own assessment items, make up your own items to directly test and assess what your students are doing. WiseWire also has a set of items that are already in our platform that are available for purchase.
Great. I know that was a burning question. Mohammed would like to know if you have any tips on SAT and ACT math.
I would suggest study hard. Harold, I know that you also have students. We both have students that are in this age range in our own homes. And what I'm seeing is, I live in Ohio, and the ACT is going to become our state exam also. So our students are expected to get a certain score on the ACT before they get their high school diploma. And the suggestion from me is that we keep in mind that while students may in some cases still be using paper and pencil for these tests, in many areas everything is becoming digital.
Yeah, the SAT also is limited. I think it's written in a way so that any student who's completed Algebra 2 is eligible to take the test. So the SAT is more of an aptitude test, how well students can think on their feet. Well, the ACT will have more typical math questions like you'd see, in the classroom. So it's more of, did they learn this? Did they learn that? But yeah, practice is really, a good way to, prepare for those tests, I think.
Let's see. Rick asks, he says his primary LMS is Google Classroom. Does WiseWire interact with Classroom, or will the students need to have another login?
Quite honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I don't use Google Classroom. Harold, do you have any experience with Google Classroom?
No, I don't, but that's a question we should look into answering. I'm sure that there is some compatibility there, but how that happens, I don't know. I couldn't speak directly to that.
That is actually a great question. You can go into onto our WiseWire site and ask that as a question directly from there, and you will get an answer very quickly.
And it looks like in our group chat, Jill is saying that students will need another login.
Oh, okay.
Great. Thank you, Jill.
Let's see. Okay, this question came up more than once. For a question that has multiple answers, so if it's a multiple selection for a multiple choice question, can each choice be given a different weight? So, do you understand?
Yes, and I know from working on large-scale assessment that that's exactly what happens. There is partial credit for, for a student who doesn't get all the answers correct, but gets some of them correct. And yeah, there are weights, and I think those weights are based on, which choice has demonstrated more reasoning skills. However, that is kind of a complex, psychometric kind of measurement design that, of course, we wouldn't be able to include here, and I don't think, many platforms would. But that's a really good question. Most of the times, I think in this case, teachers would just weight that equally, so that every correct answer would be a fraction of 1. So if they got 1 out of 2 correct, that would be 1/2. If that makes sense.
Yep. Jennifer wants to know, is there an option to choose the standards aligned to the Common Core for ELA?
Yes, actually there is. You can sort or search by the particular standard using either the standard number or using the objective that you pull directly from the standard as a phrase.
Great. And Naomi would like to know, how are students accessing the tools? Is it Chromebooks, iPads, desktops and computer labs, or laptops? She's curious about classroom access to technology resources.
That one is, it really depends on your district and your school what you're going to have access to per student. The items that we've got are compatible but with most devices. You'll find that in some cases, if it is a really complex text and there's a lot of text within the problem, for example, on some of those where it's text highlighting, the smaller screens do make it difficult to read through the text and choose those sections they should highlight. But that is going to be, that's really going to be an issue no matter what, where you go. If they can't see everything that is expected to be seen on the screen, it means that they need to scroll up and down. They're still going to be able to find it, but that scrolling up and down tends to distract from the students actually being able to put that thought process on paper or on the screen.
Now,
I know some.
Oh, go right ahead.
I was just going to add that some school districts are moving towards having students take these high-stakes assessments on a tablet, using a tablet. And as a result, there have been some functionality issues with drag-and-drop items that I know that the consortiums, Park and Smarter Balance, are kind of working that issue out, because a lot of districts do want to use tablets for state assessments. So.
Okay. Now, my question, I'm going to kind of take some of the sentiments that I've seen in some of these questions being submitted. But are the templates to create these kinds of items easy to use? How tech savvy does someone need to be to build their own?
The templates themselves are not difficult to use, but what we've found is that in many cases, the easiest way to get started is to find an item that is close to, that we've already created, and it's close to what you're looking for, even if it only uses the same format. And you have the ability to clone that item. Once you've cloned it, you can name it whatever you want it to be, with your name on it, or, my fourth grade students, whatever. And then you can take the text out of the question and the answer text out of the question, and you can change that question that you've kind of stolen from someone else and put in whatever you want it to be. Sometimes that's the best way to learn how to use the templates. They really aren't terribly difficult. I find that my students can use them, but I'm also finding that my students are much more tech savvy than I was at their age.
Yes. All right, I'm going to take one more question, and then we are going to move into pushing the polls. I see that some of you are about to lose your Wi-Fi connections. So the last question for today is, let's see. If my students don't have regular access to computers, are there paper and pencil equivalents for all types of tech-enhanced items?
I'll take that one too, because I can answer it fast, and I definitely don't want to take a chance on them not getting credit for that professional development. So in most cases, a tech-enhanced item that we've written or that someone else has written has a fairly direct equivalent that they can do on paper and pencil. For example, with the text highlighting lower grades, we just have them circle the answers within the text directly if they've got the paper and pencil. Matching items, I mean, they're something that we've had forever. The most difficult seem to be the bin sorting, but in most cases we've been able to transfer that to paper and pencil by going ahead and giving them bins on paper, and they just need to take the items and write them into the correct bin where they fit. But yes, there's definitely always a workaround that we can still have students answering the questions, but using a paper and pencil.
Fantastic. For those of you who submitted questions that we have not been able to answer due to time restraints and some other things, don't worry. We do have a record of all of these questions, and Harold and Becky will be able to answer them to you directly. With that said, there are 4 poll questions that a lot of you have missed, so I'm going to push the first poll. Let's see. Which number is prime is the first poll question. Remember, you're going to click on the answer directly within the slide and make sure you're clicking the submit button at the bottom right-hand side. All right. And the poll results. I'm sorry, there's only 2 polls, not 4. And then the second poll, which of these item types might be used to best assess the objective, identify supporting details in a paragraph? Again, do not forget to click submit at the bottom right. All right, and those are the results. So once again, Becky and Harold of WiseWire, I want to thank you both so much for taking time to speak with us today on identifying and creating effective digital assessments. For all of those who have joined in, we do have, what time is it? We've got 2 more webinars to offer you this afternoon, so feel free to take a look at those. Also, all of our webinars are on demand, so you can come back at any time and get additional professional development credit. But again, thank you so much for being a part of the Share My Lesson community. We appreciate you. And Harold and Becky, thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Henry.
All right. Everyone have a great day, and we will look for you on the next webinar. Have a good one. Oh, and I'm so sorry. Make sure to fill out the survey at the end, because that is going to help us get feedback not only to our speakers, but it'll help us when we're planning future webinars. So definitely fill out the survey at the end of this webinar presentation. Thanks so much.